as Connor had mentioned, we're really excited about this conversation in this next section to talk about how DE&I plays a significant role in what we do as speakers. In terms of how do we consider inclusivity in all the elements of DE&I in our talks, as well as things that you look for as you're looking for speakers. So I'm going to kick this off with you telling us a little bit about you. So who the heck are you, Nashunda?
Thank you. Really happy to be here. So, Nashunda Williams, I live in the Plainfield area. Um, I'm married, and my husband he's in the finance education industry, but he also cooks amazing meat on the side. So that's something a little bit about him. I have three kids, a 17-year-old. That's my daughter. She's graduating this year from Oswego East. And I have a freshman that just finished playing Bolingbrook High School, and they won. So he's on the freshman team. Yep. So basketball is his life. And then I have a 3.5-year-old, almost 4. He'll be 4 in end of March. So busy family. They've all got different personalities, and you know how, for any of you that are parents, you know there's some good times and then there's some crazy times, but that takes a big part. It's a big part of my life. Love reading. I just finished reading, I know sounds so nerdy. I never thought I would actually say this, but my son's social studies book from last year. It was like everything you need to know about American history. And it was so fun. I'm like, I'm turning into my mom, literally. So I guess I'm getting into history. And for my day job, I am the global head of DEI for a company called JLL. It's Jones Lang LaSalle. We're a commercial real estate company. Have over 100,000 employees all across the world, and I have a team of 11 employees that support DEI efforts globally. And I'm also a member of NSA. So I enjoy the craft of speaking. I have a lot of respect for speakers. And in my next life, after I finish out this phase with JLL, I hope to do more speaking. So I do a lot of speaking now in my job, but hopefully to do it a little bit more for topics that I actually create myself.
Awesome. Awesome. Taking it on the road.
Yes.
Beautiful. So why is DE&I important for us to consider as we're building our speaking business?
Yeah, I think that, you know, despite what you might hear in the media right now about DEI as like kind of like this exclusionary word or topics, it's actually the opposite. It's a very universal concept of, how do we consider, like that word is a powerful word. How do you consider everyone that's in the room? How do you consider all parties? Are we being thoughtful and mindful in everything that we do? And so from a speaker perspective, it's the same thing, right? As you're speaking to different audiences, are you being considerate of who's in that room? And, what are their lived experiences? And, at the end of the day, my role is to try to create an environment where everyone can feel comfortable and everyone can feel that their voice is heard and everyone can feel that they can thrive, everyone. And so that's really, as you think about speaking, not in terms of your content, right? Because you want to hone in on your content, but in terms of little things that you can do as you're speaking to pull people in. So
Okay, great. So one of the things that I like what you just said when you said little things that you can do to pull people in. And so that comes to the audience experience. So what are some of those things that you think would be beneficial to bring an audience in that feels inclusive?
um, I think one of the easiest ways is, I think there's the opposite, right? There's when you talk, especially when you're authentic, and I know you probably heard this before, but when you're authentic and you kind of share a little bit about yourself, there's usually somebody in the room that's experiencing that. Um, for instance, right now, I told you it's a kind of ironic. I told you my husband, he cooks meat for a living, but last year, towards the end of the last year, I went to the doctor, and I just had I had high inflammation. And, doing all this research here and there, I decided to go vegan. So I've been not go vegan full time, but I've done it for the last few weeks, and just to see if that helps, lower my inflammation. So it's a little bit about myself, right? It's just a little bit about, and maybe somebody in the audience has inflammation. Maybe somebody in the audience has gone through a journey where they were vegan for a period of their life. So little things that you can do to pull the audience in is really, really powerful.
When we were having a conversation the other day, we were talking about triggers, kind of topics,
Yes. Yeah.
phrases, gestures, things that we should be mindful of as speakers. Like one of the examples that we often hear about is when we say, "Hey, you guys,"
Uh-huh.
or "Ladies and gentlemen." Like, what are some of those things from your perspective, those triggers that we should stay away from as we're building our talk and engaging with an audience?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that, one, it absolutes, right? So anytime
Mhm.
that I had a speaker that was coming and talking about to a women's group last year. And, one of the things that I was like, oh my gosh, if they come and they say, all women are this, or another situation that happened last year, not with the speaker, but just internally, where they were going to do a presentation. They asked me to review the content before. So I'm looking through, and it was for a women's group, and they talked about imposter syndrome. And the whole point of that was saying, hey, as women often have imposter syndrome. And it sounds like a simple, okay. But if you're talking to just a women group, it's almost like if you're saying, hey, many women experience imposter syndrome. If you don't have data to back it up, you could be making an assumption that all women in that room are experiencing imposter syndrome. And it's like, actually, I'm pretty confident I don't experience imposter syndrome. I've worked a lot on myself through the past couple of years. So for you to say, like, women have imposter syndrome is it's an absolute. And that's where you want to be careful as a speaker, because once you say those absolutes, unfortunately, people get checked out. And then the whole rest of the presentation, instead of them thinking about your amazing content, they're thinking about, I can't believe this person said that I have imposter syndrome. So the way that you get around that is, one, if you're going to talk about a topic like that, that could be making general statements about, like, Gen Z or things like that, use data to protect you, saying, okay, well, there was a survey that was done in 2020, and that survey said that 50% of the women have imposter syndrome. So then it's not you projecting your own thoughts. It's actually, you're saying the data. And that way you're not going to get into any type of like issue typically. Um, how you start your speech is important. You mentioned like, hey, you guys, like things like that. And it's not one of those, because people always say sometimes to me, like, oh my, like there's so many do's and don'ts. I don't even want to speak because I'm going to say something that's going to potentially offend somebody, because the world is, we're so hyper focused on this topic. But what I would say is I do the same thing. Like I myself am not perfect. I've said things that might be inappropriate. I think the two things to really keep in mind is look at your audience, respect your audience, right? And if you're a speaker and you have the chance to talk to the people that are planning it before, ask them, ask them, because there could have been, let's say that there was a issue with pronouns at the workplace, and, one group really wanted pronouns, one didn't. And, you go into this, you know, speaking, and you're talking about, pronouns, not realizing there was a whole big conversation at the office about this. It's sensitive. So and you don't know that. You're not going to know the audience unless you ask. So I would say at the end of the day, ask, say, hey, is there anything going on that's kind of sensitive that I should know? How do you usually start your presentations? Do you say pronouns typically? Because if you do say that to an audience that has no idea, then you might want to explain, hi, I go by the name of she, her. The reason I do this is because I don't want people to misgender me or assume my gender. So that's what I do it. Versus if you say it to an audience that might not have any idea, you're going to lose them. I'm going to go, wait, what? What did they just say? So it's just little things like that. And if you ask the planning team, they're going to know, like, hey, typically we always say pronouns when we introduce, or we don't. So that way you don't have to be going, oh man, I'm going to, talk into a landline that I don't even know about, right? So
Mhm.
just ask.
And I think that's a really great call out to get that into practice, to say, are there some things happening within the organization recently that I need to stay away from? And I find when I do ask that question, there's always something that they'll say.
Yes.
You may not want to say this. You might want to mention our CEO because that's very important. So it's like that question, and because we have absolutely no clue what they're going to say. And
Yep.
sometimes the things that they tell me, I'm like, oh, shoot, I would have never thought of that. And so it really helps us to, it really shows that we are intentional and considerate of the audience. So I think that that call out is so important. So thank you for sharing that. Along those lines, when you were talking about language, one of the things that you had mentioned before is this idea around avoiding divisive language and promotion. And so one of the things that, because we have folks in this room who caters to a particular audience. And
Mhm.
so how do we strike that balance between promoting ourselves to the particular audience that we're catering to, but not appearing that we're being exclusive and divisive?
Yeah, that's a good one. Typically, and this is kind of what I do at work. For instance, we have business resource groups, and they're groups of um, different people from different backgrounds that connect on a commonality. Like we have our empowering Black professionals at our job. We have our women's group. We have veterans. We have our parent giver group. So we have all these different groups across the world, and what we always say is the parent group is focused on focused on parents, but welcome to all, right? We're focused on, the needs of the Black community in our group, but all are welcome. All are welcome.
Mhm.
So really, and this is where, I come back to the beginning with some of the backlash. It's around they're taking a part of diversity, equity, inclusion and saying, you're excluding me because it's about this group. And you can, people have in general, right? Just different interests. You can like skydiving, I can like skiing, and we can all be together. But if I'm going to a skiing group and it's only for skiers only, and you can't come in if you have nothing to do with skiing, that's where it becomes problematic, right? So as you're thinking about the language that you put onto your website, things like that, you can say, hey, I talk about leadership, and then I have a focus on women in leadership. But again, open to all are welcome. Like think little things like that really help, especially right now because there is such a focus on DEI being exclusionary. So just a little
Mhm.
bit language. Yeah, I focus on women, but open to all. I focus on, I have a talk about Asians and what they have gone through in America and what they've overcome, but open and welcome to all.
Yeah, I love that language. One last question before we toss it to the group. And by the way, Steve dropped a comment in chat. He says, great example, Nashunda. I work for a global medical device company and the women's group meetings are open to all. So
Ah,
just
yes,
validating
yes.
what you shared. So my last question for you before we toss it to the group is, you also have the opportunity to select speakers. And so as you're looking for speakers to come and speak within your organization, what are some of the things you're looking for? Like, what are some of the packages, if you will, that speakers have presented that you said, wow, what were those elements that they included that made them really stand out from other speakers who presented a package?
Um, yeah, I think that there's a couple of different aspects. One, so yeah, I brought in a couple speakers last year, and we're actually looking at, and I evaluate speakers for some of the bigger events because like we have a big leadership meeting with like our top 150 leaders at the company, and we're using a speaker bureau for it. But I get to evaluate some of the and give my feedback into, hey, is this speaker going to be inclusive? Like, do we have a good feel about this? So when it comes to your what you're putting out there, right? I look for a speaker um, who can again hit on a couple different things. Now, when you have your speaker reel, when I play the speaker reel, if at the end of that speaker reel I don't learn anything new, I'm kind of like, okay, you're just speaking. And a good example is Shola Richards. He is an amazing speaker. He's so good that I first came into this role about 2.5 years ago, and I literally came into the role and they're like, Nashunda, we have a speaker to talk about workplace culture and kindness. You're going to introduce them. We had like this event with like 3,000 people. Like, you're going to introduce them. Like, oh wow. So talking to Shola and introduced him. But when I look at his speaker reel, he has these little like nuggets. He talks about like an African word that means I am because we are. And it's like, ooh, that's like just one of those things that kind of hits you. And he said, I can still disagree with you. I can disagree without having disrespect for you, right? Like there's this little, and this is his speaker reel. So it's just, if you can give someone something, yes, thank you, Jeff. um, so if you can give the speakers something that makes them go, huh, interesting. Wow, like make me want to know more about you versus like just giving your best talk or your best like audience reaction. Audience reaction is good, right? If you can get some audience like laughing and things like that. There's a term that I just talked to my HR who leads HR here at JLL, and we were again talking about speakers, and she's like, I want someone that's entertaining, but then also educating, and she's like, edumatainment. It's like she just made up the word edumatainment. So it's like, again, you want to be educating and entertaining, and so as I'm looking at the speaker. As the speaker video, I'm looking, okay, can this person actually engage the audience, make them kind of smile and laugh a little bit, but am I actually getting some insights too? So keep that in mind. I go to the website, and again, I look for speakers that kind of, again, if you're telling me you're a leadership speaker, you might focus on women, and you get on there and you're like, we need to promote women and women are the future. I'm like, ooh, again, you're absoluting, so anytime you're going to give an absolute like that, that's like a ooh. But again, think about like something interesting. Leave me hanging so that at the end of the, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I want to know more about what they said, about, disagreeing with, and then also respecting people, things like that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to toss it to our Speaker Academy cohort. You use the hand raise feature so that we can see you, because we have spotlight view, so it's hard to see if you're not on this frame. So go ahead and do the hand raise feature, and then we'll take some questions. So this portion is called Ask Nashunda Anything. Kevin, kick us off.
Thank you. Thanks very much for coming. I love your approach, especially this, you called it absoluting.
Yeah.
That's going to be your keynote talk. I was talking to a professor from Rutgers University, and he's a philosophy professor, and he said they're asking all of us to turn in our nameplates so they can put our pronouns underneath. And he said, I'm going to tell them to put I and me on mine. And he was resentful about the fact, why do we have to do this? And it struck me again that it's this absoluting piece. How do you manage helping other people understand this absoluting as kind of not a good thing? And kind of what are some of the challenges you have in your job where people do absolute things?
Yeah.
Then they get resentful.
That's a great question. I think, it's been interesting being in this role for almost little over 2 years. And I think that, people have their opinions based off their lived experience, right? So even taking the pronoun example, that professor probably doesn't have any context. Whatever context they do have, it's probably based off maybe an article they read on the internet or a snippet. And usually people that do have these kind of absolute ideas aren't ones that are going in depth on a topic, right? You're taking a piece of something, and you're kind of going, I don't know this, I don't understand this, but I'm not going to actually look into the research. And what I find is, even with very controversial topics, I usually try to talk to the person, ask them questions, meet them where they are, and explain. So if somebody were to say, hey, like, I'm not doing that, I'm not putting my pronoun, I would say, oh, interesting. Well, what are your thoughts on pronouns? And, how do you feel about the use of pronouns? And then they would say, oh, well, that's, why would I need to say that I'm a male? Like, who cares, whatever. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Do you, one point, like for me, I wear different hair pieces. And so sometimes I have my hair very, very short. And when I had my hair short, people sometimes would think that I'm a male. And when you put your pronoun on your name, you're just saying, hey, this is who I am and this is what I identify with. How do you feel about that? Would you, if you were misgendered, like things like that. So I just try to engage in a dialogue. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's interesting when people come at me, because people come at me sometimes in a very, direct way. But I always try to say, let's talk. And sometimes they just leave me hanging. And then I know that it's like they want to feel how they want to feel. And that's okay. Like people are allowed to feel what they want to feel. But anytime they actually say, let's talk, it always ends up being a pretty good conversation. And even if, again, we agree to disagree, we both have a better understanding afterwards.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
Awesome.
welcome.
Thank you. Great question, Kevin. Brooke.
Hi, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm really learning a lot. My question is, Nashunda, when you are vetting speakers, and let's say you're not using a speakers bureau, maybe someone recommended a name to you, or you stumbled upon a website or a LinkedIn search, are there certain things that you look for in a LinkedIn profile or a website that would help you vet this person?
Oh, that's a good question.
A picture of them speaking, a video snippet. I know that a personal recommendation means a lot, but is there something you're looking for, or maybe something that would be a red flag that might help us as we're building our brand on LinkedIn or a website?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So, if from a corporate standpoint, when I look for speakers, there are a couple of things that I keep in mind when I'm looking at websites and things like that. So, the first one is if I'm bringing a speaker to speak to a diverse group, right? I'm usually looking for diversity plus something else. So I don't want, it's like you're coming to a group of a diverse group and you're talking about how diversity is important. It's like they kind of already know that. So what else are you going to bring that's a little bit different? I'm really big on leadership capabilities. And I think that's like kind of a universal thing. But if you can have leadership and culture, just tagging on something that I know the group is going to leave feeling like they've got some skill sets. Like, what are we going to learn after your speech? So I try to look for that. I'm trying to think of what other things that I look for. I look for, again, things that I can learn. If I go to your website and like within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know that, like a fact or interesting kind of thing that'll pull me in. You're going to get a lot farther than somebody that's like, hey, I'm a diversity speaker. Diversity is really important. And everybody should, get along and things like that. I go, yeah, okay, next. But what are you gonna tell me that's gonna make it pop? That makes me pop. And usually those are the ones that I'll go to the next step for.
Thank you for the question, Brooke. Kevin.
Oh, one quick thing too that for me, and this is probably a lot of people that hire speakers, are like my reputation is on the line. So if I bring you in and you're talking to an audience, try to talk to that speaker ahead of time, or talk to the whoever's planning it ahead of time, and ask them like I said before, are there any pitfalls or anything to avoid? Is what's going on in the company? Because if you come and you say something that either is a trigger or is just not okay, my stomach's gonna turn, because they're not gonna look at the speaker, they're gonna look at Nashunda. You brought this person in and they said this. And that's happened, it hasn't happened to me yet, thank goodness, but it's happened to other people. And so you really want to just take care. So Shola, the one that I talked about before, the reason we asked him back, I didn't do it, wasn't me, but it was the company, the people that were planning it asked him back. And I'm like, wow, why did they ask Shola back? Shola will have like a 45-minute session prior to the speech. So his speech is kind of all laid out. Like he has his speech, he talks about kindness and civility in the workplace. But what he does is he has a 45-minute session and he'll ask, what are the terms that JLL uses to describe who's the audience? Okay, we're brokers. Okay, so what do the brokers do? They do da-da-da-da. And so when he got up there on the stage, I will tell you, last year he spoke, and at the end of his speech, So I opened him up again. There's so many people that there was a couple people that thought he worked at JLL, like literally were like, oh wait, he doesn't work there? Like I thought he worked at our company, because he embodied it. He took 45 minutes and then he sprinkled little things in the presentation that would make you feel like he knew the terminology. But he asked very good questions, so that by the time they were done with that, people were like, it was just felt amazing. He even used some of the same content he used the year before, and it's still just because he's just that good. But I could tell like he sprinkled in a little bit, and he still had that same meeting before. What's going on now? What's different? And I'm like, hey, if you really can hone in on, people think that diversity means just pulling somebody into the pitch or into the sales pitch, and it's like that's not what it is. So please hone in on that, but don't make it look like it was me. And he did it so smooth to where I was like, thank you. That's the message I wanted them to hear. But he kept true to his, like, the 80% of the content was, again, true to who he is, and he just sprinkled in a little bit here and there to make it really, really special.
So if you could, while Kevin is getting ready to ask a question, how are you spelling Shola's name? And we can drop it in chat, because I'm sure people are.
Yeah,
Shola. Okay, okay.
Richards is the last name. Yeah, follow him on LinkedIn. He has some pretty good content as well.
Awesome. We'll drop that in the chat, because I'm sure people are going to be curious / nosy about what he does and how he presents himself.
And his speaker, not his, I don't even know if this is his speaker reel, but his video online, it's almost like a documentary, because he's at that level now that, he's got consistent speaking engagements. But when you listen to it, it's almost like a documentary. He's walking into the stage, he's telling you a little bit about himself personally. He's just engaging you in a way where you, in that speaker, will go, oh, I want to be your friend. And that's what you want. You want to be so engaging that you want people to go, wow, I want to get to know you more. Like, I want you to be my friend.
Great. Kevin, question?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you. This is, I love the perspective of being inclusive and involving, and not excluding anyone. I think that's absolutely the key to a lot of these concepts. And I'm also, very conscious of making sure that issues, like the ones you've been talking about, including pronouns, are just yet another way to open the table to allow people to be comfortable and to be heard. What I was interested in asking, and I'm actually a little uncomfortable about this. I don't bring this up, but I was invited to a scientific conference. A little background on what I do. I do social psychology in developmental locations, and we specifically work in a way that we're invited to work with local populations. Specifically, we work in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And a very uncomfortable situation happened to me. I was invited to a scientific conference at a university in Haiti. And I was invited because a friend of mine was actually presenting that year, and I was invited by one of the organizers to consider a presentation I might make the following year. So I was encouraged to participate, and it was a panel discussion. I wasn't in the panel, but my friend was. And two of the panelists specifically went down after I asked a question, they said, you shouldn't have your question answered. And I was like, what? And well, one person said it, and then her associate brought her up. I want to give you a little insight. The person who had the most problem with me was a young white woman. At least that's what I would identify her as if I had to, use such identifying terms. Her associate was a non-white woman, a person of color, but not Haitian.
Okay.
In any case, they both immediately jumped on me just for asking a question and said, you're a white man, you've caused all these problems, you're the reason that there's inequity in Haiti. So not only don't I think your question should be answered, but we don't think you should participate anymore in this conversation. And it was just a general scientific question. I was shocked that I was being centered for my
being
characteristic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And nobody else said anything. Everybody was uncomfortable. it was the Haitian people who were there were just absolutely amazed, I thought, from what I interacted with them afterwards. They came up to me and apologized, but they weren't in the organizational structure. There was no one in the organization specifically there, just the
I'm conscious
panelists.
of time. Do you ever want to comment on that, Nashunda? Have any comments?
Yeah, no, and well, was there a particular question around? I do have a comment about it, but I want to make sure,
Oh,
Kevin, your question.
Yeah, no. So my question, yeah, it got a little long. Was I could tell you what I did, but I'm curious what you think I should do or someone should do in that situation.
Well, I think first, in situations like that, it's super uncomfortable, right? Like, you said something, obviously there was something said that somebody probably misunderstood or took as something else. And I think in those type of situations, there's two things that usually happen, or three things. The one, everybody gets uncomfortable and freezes, and you don't know what to do, which is unfortunately the typical thing. Two, if you have an ally or someone there to say, hey, wait, I don't think that, Kevin was intending this to be here. This is maybe where he was coming from. It looked like that didn't happen. But all of you on the call, if you have opportunities where it gets uncomfortable and you can be that ally, do be that ally. We need more of that. And then three, if you could tell that there was something, because people get misunderstood all the time. Even me, I write something, people are like, well, why? And I'm like, wait, that's not what I meant. And I think just taking a step back and say, well, I'm sorry, it looks like my question may have offended you in some type of way. I apologize. That wasn't my intent. My goal in asking this was this. However, if you do not, you do not want to answer this question, I totally respect that, because you have to understand the cultural nuances in Haiti, the history, the background. So you're coming into a country that's had a lot of oppression. And so just by, your presence, there could be some trigger emotionally trauma that might have been coming out. It has nothing to do with you, but coming into that place, just kind of taking that humble back and not taking it personal, because it wasn't, clearly you're asking a question, so it couldn't have been, it couldn't have been.
But I mean, just to follow up, the person who was cutting me off was not the person I was asking. She was on the panel, but I was asking my friend a question to be more specific in his presentation. She interrupted our interaction and shut me down because of my characteristics. And then so she wasn't Haitian. She was an invited guest on the panel, but she didn't want me to participate.
Kevin, I think we'll call a halt to hear this one, because it's a very specific instance, but it does show the issues that we've got. We've only got about 5 more minutes before we close this down. I think Jan has a question for you, Nashunda, and I love all of your content, and I don't want to be inappropriate here and putting this one down, but I want to get in more questions. Jan.
Spoke about not only DEI, you also look for leadership, and you touched a little bit. That tells you this person. Oh, I'm sorry, my mic is.
John, you may have to just type it into chat. If you're going in and out, just go ahead and drop the question in chat, and we'll watch chat for it to come through.
Okay.
I have popped one of Shola Richards' videos into the chat as well, if you want to have a look at that. And just watching him for a couple of seconds with closed captioning, he is impressive.
So John's question is, how do you determine someone has leadership? And John, are you asking how do you determine if someone has leadership credibility and expertise? Is that the gist of your question?
Oh. Yeah, so if it is, I'll just talk quickly about that. So, again, I look at a website, and let's say your focus is on leadership. Do you have a couple of articles that I can read to kind of go a little bit deeper? And it doesn't have to be a ton, but like, what is your stance on leadership? It's a huge topic. So are you talking about servant leadership? Are you talking about, but if you just say, I speak on leadership, that's too broad for me. I'm like, I don't know where you're going to go with this. Like, what are you going to say that? So I need to understand a little bit about what your stance is. And usually, again, it's the leadership plus, like if you leadership plus culture at the workplace, it's like, oh, because when you tie two different concepts together, it usually provides some kind of unique twists or unique angle. And that's where we're looking for, right? We want speakers to come and you want to leave going, I didn't think about that before, but now, it's a little bit different. So if you could just write maybe like 2 or 3 articles or have a blurb on how you feel about the topic, you're going to put yourself above somebody that just says, hey, I'm so-and-so and I speak on leadership. It's like, oh yeah, that everybody else does too. What's going to make you different? And I look for that.
That's awesome. Thanks. Thank you, John, for that question. So as we could probably talk the rest of the session around this. This is great conversation, but as we bring it to a close, one of the things that we love to do is, because we talk about a lot of different things and we want our participants to walk away with kind of those nuggets, those big ideas, if you will. And we also think it's important for them to share with you what are some of the big ideas they got from what you shared. And so we want to reserve this time for just that. So if you guys, our participants, I just did the thing.
It's okay.
If our participants could drop into chat, what were some of your big ideas, some aha moments, things that you're taking away from the conversation that we had with Nashunda? So you can drop it in chat. And we'll save that and send that feedback to Nashunda. And also you can do a hand raise and we can capture you that way as well. But what are some of your big ideas? Okay, they're coming through. Speaking topic plus something was a big takeaway. Always add and welcome to all is something else that someone is taking away.
And don't make it weird. Don't be like, hey, I'm Nashunda and I talk about women, but I'm welcome to all. Like, don't make it weird. It's like natural. Do it in a very natural way.
I thought it was interesting that you want to learn something. You sound like you're kind of a learning machine. And so just having a demo that's kind of good and interesting is one thing, but then you want to come away and say, so what did I learn from that? And I thought that was a terrific perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
They're flooding in. Understanding the power of the speaker reel and how we want others to get more curious about who we are and what we teach on. Jeff says, what makes you different on the topic you speak about? So that importance of differentiation. Thank you for your approach, and gentle, firm, friendly approach is awesome. Great reminder about not speaking in absolutes. So that seems to be a really good, prevalent theme, is not speaking in those absolutes. Be conscious and sensitive to your audience. And huge key is communicate prior with professional who brought you in so that you are on the same page. Big aha. Great presentation. Love the idea of doing the homework, understanding needs and the consideration of the audience. Speaking topic plus, so that's really resonating with our group. Respecting your audience. And then Jeff offers the value of being as inclusive as you can be and being open to your client's needs. So that's those are some big takeaways from our group. So Nashunda, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. On the heels of your son's win, and
yes.
Now you can go and celebrate that. But we
yes.
really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and expertise with us.
2 more little quick things. One, language in the DEI space is really, as you can tell with all the news and all that stuff, is becoming divisive. That term DEI is becoming a, whose side are you on? As a speaker, think about the language on your site. DEI, inclusion and belonging, is where everybody's really talking about right now. Inclusion and belonging, like how do we make people feel like they belong in the workplace? Inclusion. So those words are a little bit less divisive than DEI, right? It's the same thing, right? To me, I'm like, as long as we get the objective, it's the same thing. And the other thing with absolutes, having a perspective. So when I say absolutes, it's really just talking about like, it's important to have a perspective and a say, but it's about the right thing. Like you could have a perspective about culture in the workplace and be absolutely adamant about that, right? But when it gets in terms of having absolutes about gender, someone's lived experience, that's where it gets a little tricky, right? But you should, as a speaker, feel passionate and have a say about certain topics, but ones around, again, race, religion, gender, those absolutes are really like a no, it's just very controversial. Now, if you want to talk about that, it's fine, but just realize like that's from a corporate perspective, it's very hard to pull speakers in with those kind of topics because it's too controversial at the workplace.
Thank you so much, Nashunda. Thank you. Until next time, we'll see you around NSA Illinois because you are one of us, one of our members. And so
I will be around.
Yeah, we'll be saying, hey, Nashunda, when we see you at the different events. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Have an awesome weekend.